It's TEDA Time.
Living in Terrebonne, living in Terrebonne. You sure won't want to miss it, and I'll bet that you'll revisit living in Terrebonne.
Local Terrebonne Parish economic news.
Welcome to TEDA Time. I'm here with Cohen Guidry, who is the Executive Director of TEDA, and we also have Chris Pulaski, who's with Terrebonne Parish Planning and Zoning. Thank you all very much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yep. All right. I hear some good news on a big award that y'all got. I know y'all talked about it a little bit last time, that y'all were in the running for it. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Certainly. We were contacted in March of 23 by the Greater New Orleans Foundation. And they contacted President Dove, and he had a conflicting schedule that day, so I went in to represent the parish. I had no idea what we were going to talk about, what they were going to do. I knew it was the next 100-year challenge. So looking at some of the other parishes that had ideas and posters and things like that, what they did is they took $1 million, and they said, well, they're going to break it into 10 different grants, and they're going to have 13 parishes competing for them. So Chris Pulaski had just shown me the illustrations of the shell property that was donated, the 4,000 acres out on Savan Road, 90. A lot of people probably know as a big fire pit that we just had over the last few months. So they were really excited about, Greater New Orleans Foundation's had some people in their group that were really excited about this project, and it just came to me right afterwards, like, we want to hear more about this. So came back to home. I called Chris on my drive back, and I said, man, do you think you can help me? I don't know a lot about it. And Chris was like, oh, yeah, absolutely. So we started kind of sitting down and planning, putting things together, deciding what we're going to do. They put some webinars. Greater New Orleans Foundation put some webinars on to go through the whole brick grant process. And what they do is it's multiple page application that you have to put in. So we had some assistance from Chris's group, from IT. We had to do some pictures and like a drone footage and some different footage. Chris did the voiceover for the speaking portion of it, and it was I want to say it was 15 pages total was the application, and then it went in for submittal. And through that process, they had people all over the country that were going through that work with these different types of programs. And in the meantime, they put on a workshop in 3 different cities, and we happened to go to the one in Hammond. And unbeknownst to us, we were the only parish that showed up in Hammond. It was Laplace. And they had consultants from all over the country. They had, who were some of the other folks or professions?
Well, St. John Parish was there on that day. It was us and St. John were the only 2 there.
And they had probably 15 consultants that just...
Wagner and Ball architects, landscape architects, they had engineers, they had environmental scientists, folks from other NGOs. It was a good cross-section of consultants, so... Yeah.
So even one of the guys said, you guys got about $125,000 worth of consulting work all for yourselves on Today for free. So we were pretty excited about that. So they kept in touch with us through the process. I think we had our submittal was the end of July, and middle of August they said, look, things are looking pretty good. And then beginning of September, I got a call from one of the ladies with Greater New Orleans Foundation, and she says, look, this is top secret, but you guys were one of the winners.
Wonderful.
So we couldn't release any information yet. So we were called to New Orleans to go and pick up our 4-foot check, the big one. and so at that point, we were able to do our press release. And what we learned through that process is that there were 2 winners from Terrebonne Parish.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so there was another organization that submitted some and won, but there were over 30 groups that participated from the 13 parishes in the state for this.
And y'all were one of the final 10. That's great. So that's the $100,000 that's going to.
Well, if I look at the check numbers, I think we were in the top 3 or 4 based off of how they. So no, but we're gonna certainly look into doing this. $100,000 is going to start the process for the environmental impact for the project.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's something that's got to do, I guess, part of the permitting process as well, huh?
Right. So, I mean, part of this project has already initially begun because, as a lot of folks know, they're under construction with a pump station behind the old Rouse's at the corner of MLK and St. Charles. So there was an environmental study that was done associated with that, but we're going to basically amend that and enhance that environmental study because we're talking about 4,000 acres with all of the uses that the stormwater basin management project that we were pitching to these guys is going to require. So there's a lot more that's going to be going into this whole project besides just that pump station. That pump station is probably one of the cornerstones of the project, but there's a lot more that goes into it. And this grant, $100,000 is really meant to, and I think that was part of the criteria for the project selection, was how viable of a project it is that it would receive federal funding. So they know that $100,000 wouldn't cover a project of this magnitude, but they're looking to say, okay, we give you $100,000, you spend it on something, makes your application all the more attractive to, say, like BRIC or HMGP or some other major federal funding source.
I see. So it's nice to get it all already and get all the engineering done, and that's the way it's easier to get that funding order for whenever it comes construction time, certainly. We need to take a quick break. When we come back, we can discuss the project a little bit more in detail and exactly all of what it entails, okay? Stay tuned for more.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Terrebonne General Health Systems, modern technology and timeless caring. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bourke, know your rights. South Louisiana Bank, it's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough. Alford and Associates, for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality.
Welcome back to TEDA Time. I'm here with Cohen Guidry, the Executive Director of TEDA, and Chris Pulaski as well. Before the break, we're talking a little bit about a new project. I believe it's called the Terrebonne Resilience Project that is being in the works, developed. A $100,000 grant was awarded by the Greater New Orleans Foundation. Can you tell us, I guess, what all goes into the project and what's going to be done?
Well, there's some of the signs that are out on the Highway 90, Savan Road. Just what it kind of gives a illustration of the pump station that's being put in place right now, and then the whole outline of it. And the funding for the pump station is already, I think that's already pretty much covered. And then so there's going to have to be a retention. You can't call it a levee, but a retention dike or berm that's going to go around it. It'll be a 10-mile circumference that covers the entire area. So from the recreation piece, we looked at, putting a hard improved surface on the top for running, walking, biking, and I think there's a lot of really cool different ideas. I think it'd be a nature trail, healthy ecosystem. Birding is a huge thing in Terrebonne Parish out of Lake Homa's, now this place. And we have got a huge bald eagle population in the parish. And, so getting a healthy marsh, getting rid of, going after. So one of the neat things that Greater New Orleans Foundation will help us with as well is they're always searching for possible grants that something like this might fit into. So we probably won't find one grant that will encompass every aspect of this recreational piece. but there certainly will be multiples because, we want to get rid of a bunch of the trash trees and make a healthy ecosystem. Plant cypress trees, although they can't grow in water. They can live in water, but you can't plant them as small trees. But I'll leave that to Chris because he is a landscape architect. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly a good point, Cohen, because this project offers up a lot of different things that could open doors for different funding sources. I mean, ultimately, we're looking to improve the ecosystem and restore that area to what it used to be, which back in the day, it was prime wood duck habitat. And what do wood ducks like? They like open water and trees. So that's an ultimate goal for this project. And you can look at USDA has urban tree foresting programs that have millions of dollars available, but we have to get to that point where we're ready for that. So the project will start with what it ultimately is a stormwater management basin. I mean, this is, even though it's specific to the area between 311, Highway 24, Highway 90, and Savannah Road, that's just the project boundaries, but the benefits to it are basically the entire north and western half of Terrebonne Parish because we all drain into the intracoastal. And if the intracoastal levels are high, we can't drain into it. So that water just sits in our system over here. But if we have the ability to store 1.57 billion gallons of it in this basin, then that gives us the ability to, or lessens the risk of flooding while we're waiting for the intracoastal levels to go down. As an added benefit, like we've seen recently with the marsh fire, and that's not the first time that this area has caught fire, certainly probably the worst time of anyone's recent memories, and it was that peat moss out there that kept smoldering and burning for days or weeks. Well, what put it out was pumping water into that system, and that's exactly what this project is intended to do for stormwater management. So we can add fire reduction to the list of risk reductions that this project will benefit. Water quality will be improved because it also releases water back into our system. So because of the improvements to that habitat, it'll make the water, it'll filter out all the impurities and things like that. So, it checks off a lot of boxes. Recreation, of course, is one of the big things that we look for. And, as Cohen mentioned, there's plans for a multi-purpose path. We don't have rails to trails, but we have the Cajun rails to trails. We could put them on levees and containment berms, like in this instance. Kayak launches, canoeing, there's all kinds of opportunities for this space. Yeah,
and it's a beautiful area. And when it was first donated, I was like, man, that's a beautiful area, but you can't see any of it except the outside of it, which you can drive by, and you can't certainly walk it because it's sinking. But being able to access it through, either a trail all the way around it, or those walking trails through it, you really can see it and not see just the beautiful aspect, but you can also see all the water that's being stored. And when it's dual purpose like that, I find it's easier to get funding. It's a lot easier to convince people to funding if it's serving multiple uses as well.
Right.
I think it's going to be a great quality of life project, for people, and hopefully encourage people to get out and start getting more exercise, getting fit. I think from an economical standpoint, you bring in these 5K races and they want to see a different scenery. They don't always want to run right through the middle of Boston for their marathon or triathlons or whatever it may be. There's a piece in the upper corner from the pump station, and I'll talk about that when we come back after this next break, of what some ability for that is just for tourism.
Sure. Certainly exciting stuff. We hope to see it come to fruition, but a good start with this $100,000. We'll talk a little bit more about it right after this quick break. Stay tuned.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Parabon General Health Systems, modern technology, and timeless caring. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bork, know your rights. South Louisiana Bank, it's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough. Alford and Associates, for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality.
Welcome back to TEDA Time. I'm here with Cohen Guidry, the Executive Director of TEDA, and Chris Pulaski with Terrebonne Parish Consolidated Government. Before the break, Cohen, we're talking a little bit about the pump station and some opportunity for tourism. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Absolutely. The illustration that we had up, so this in the top right corner is where the pump station is, and if you go all the way to the left, our tourist center is right there off of 90 in the upper left corner. And, that I think would be a great deal for people because it's right off of 90. It's one small exit, a loop to come back around. And, think about somebody who's driving on a long trip. They still got to get to New Orleans. They got dogs or kids in the car and they want to stretch their legs or go look at something cool. To be able to go out and do that, I think it'd be a great opportunity. We look at places for kayak launches. Whether it be, and that's still in the planning phases. I think that we've got some work to do to get with the public to find out, because that's one of the requirements. And in the scoring process, when they came back on the grant side, they said, getting more public input in doing your study to find out exactly what it wants would probably help your guys' cause a bunch. So, find out from them what waterway is going to be a kayaking area, what would be, if we put them in the bayous, Whiskey Bayou or Bayou Keene, would that be infringing on privacies and versus putting it inside the middle? And, so there's a lot of planning, a lot of things to still consider, but I think it's a great starting point. But Chris, some of the funding, on this we were talking about earlier, I know you wanted to give some input on that.
Yes, so one big source of funding that the parish has available post-Hurricane Ida is Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, or HMGP. Now, this is FEMA funding, but it's a pretty broad category that the funds can be used for, but it is essentially hazard mitigation or reducing risk. So because this is a stormwater management project that ultimately will benefit from a drainage standpoint, it falls into that category. So we've already submitted this project under the HMGP application. I think we have it listed as $6.7 million overall. So that's the funding for the pump station's already been secured. Obviously, it's under construction. So this is for everything else. Now, is it enough for the long term? No, because we're going to also have to look for those urban forestry programs or other federal funds. But the way these large projects work is once you open the door for federal funding, then it's easier to get the next round of it. Let me put it that way. So HMGP is certainly one potential source, but like with a lot of federal funding, what they're also looking for is how does it benefit your community, certain members of your community, in particular low to moderate income or disadvantaged communities. So those are the kinds of things that we have to also review and expand upon with our application, so that if we were to go, say, for BRIC or some other large-scale federal funding, we can show how it benefits those groups as well. And it does. I mean, we did that to a degree in the GNOF application, but I think we need to do a deeper dive into it to make it really effective.
Sure. And I think in that area, I think you have a lot of large apartment complexes that people that don't have yards, that don't have anywhere to go outside and access. I mean, that's all something that could be highlighted as well, I would think.
Right,
Yep.
right.
Somebody asked me the other day when I was showing them this illustration, you see the Shell logo in the middle. Thank you. I want to make this thing look like NASCAR. There's a lot of interested. I was just in a meeting with Chevron, and they're really about giving back to the community. They've got a large facility out in Gray, and when I showed them this idea, they were just, what can we do? So, the great thing about the Greater New Orleans Foundation group is they're going to go out and look for federal, state, private, different types of grants that'll, so it's not like Chris was saying, it's not all the funding may not come from one place, but if we can start working on, the money collection for this phase, and people are, what's a timeline till it's completed? I think this could be a very long-term project, and it's probably it's got to be evergreen because it's going to change. We may come up with better ideas than what the original illustrations have, may, expound upon more things than what we originally have in these ideas. So I think it'll be something to build on.
It's a good blend of green infrastructure and traditional infrastructure, this project. I mean, you have the pump station, you have the containment berm, you have water control structures. I mean, those are things that you just can't do without. However, the things like the ecosystem enhancement, the tree plantings, that's the green infrastructure that they require and want to see, because that's what makes a project like this successful in the long term. And you talk about how long this project's going to be. I mean, if we're talking about a tree planting project or program, and we're talking about cypress trees or water oaks or other things, I mean, we're talking long after the three of us are gone.
Yeah.
And pretty much everybody at home watching after you're gone too.
If anybody's ever planted an oak tree that came in a 5-gallon bucket, your grandchildren will be old people by the time it gets to any significant size.
But it's the future generations for Terrebonne Parish that this project will also benefit. So.
And it's going to provide some much needed, I believe, recreation activity, trails like that is desperately needed to get people off of the road to be able to, ride around beautiful scenery. Sounds like a great project, and thank you for coming on. And
thanks for having us.
All right.
You're welcome.
Stay tuned for more right here on HTV.